over collapsing on an engineer who will die on the spot. It will happen. Something will go wrong. You build a hospital, how do you know that there will be no malpractice? You build some other organization, and how do you know that somebody somewhere will not get involved in sexual harassment? But at that point in time, some organizations will be forgiven, some organizations will not be forgiven. So what are you settling that deal with? You're settling that deal with reputation. The interesting thing about reputation as capital compared to other forms of capital is if you lose those capital, then you can regain. Reputation is very difficult to regain. So you look at what's happening with Ranbaxy. Phenomenal company. I will argue that Ranbaxy was a greater pioneer, a greater visionary than any one of us in this room. They figured out that bulk drug will be a big deal. They figured out that many of the patents will go out of patent. Many of the drugs will go out of patent. They completely understood what does it take to make a drug, who's buying the drug, et cetera, et cetera. But today, it's, Ranbaxy is an untouchable name. And whatever they may do, they may say that we have changed ownership, whatever it is, but it's not the same thing again, because the company lost reputation as capital. All of you have heard about Rajat Gupta. Rajat Gupta cannot be faulted for competence. He's a man, IIT. He's a man who went to Wharton School. He's a man who joined McKinsey. He's a man, Indian, who went to become chairman of McKinsey, chairman emeritus of McKinsey. When he became chairman emeritus of McKinsey, I don't know how many of you know, but some 200-odd McKinsey partners flew from all over the world to felicitate him in his Connecticut, New York house. And McKinsey actually got an elephant to be tied outside as a tribute. It's not easy to get an elephant to be tied in an American, American landscape. Not happening, okay? And look at what happened. The guy did a stupid thing. He called his buddy and talked about boardroom stuff. And forget about the jail sentence. Forget about the loss of reputation to himself, to the country, and to his profession, and to his firm. It'll never come back to him. Every time he'll shake hands with Rajat Gupta, all his life's work is gone. So if you look at reputation as a form of capital, once lost, it's very difficult to get it back. And the interesting thing about reputation is that you don't get it when you're big. You build it when you are really small, really, really small. So I congratulate you people that you have been able to bring this really wonderful set of people because you have created that reputation, but don't take it for granted. It's not about relationship. It's not about your CRM system. It's happening one transaction at a time, one customer at a time, one phone call at a time. And the foundation of the reputation capital is being built when you are really tiny. So we need to scale our reputation before we scale our enterprise. The fifth thing I'll talk about is that people who scale have scaled their people. And this is counterintuitive. And this is not counterintuitive. Actually, this is motherhood and apple pie statement. Because everybody talks about people and how people are our most important resources and so on and so forth. And how the job of every CEO, every entrepreneur is to build people. But you know what? Every single one of us in this room are competing with our people. We don't realize it, but we are doing it all the time. So let's imagine that there's a fantastic $1 billion deal in New York to be negotiated day after tomorrow. So who's taking the next available flight for this important meeting? You and I are doing it. Because you can't risk it. So there's a client who's coming over, and who's making the presentation? You and I are making the presentation. A negotiation has to be done. Who's dashing out, in his best finery. It's Jaideep who's adjusting his Hermes tie and going and impressing the daylight out of the client. So in the process, our people are taking a back seat. Now the problem of being Jaideep as a great negotiator is that he can't be two Jaideeps. So if there's a great opportunity coming up in New York and at the same time in Pune, he can't split. So he can't scale. Us entrepreneurs, and many of us here in this room who are professional executives, who are like entrepreneurs, we don't realize all the time we're competing with our own people. So whether it's the negotiation, critical negotiation, the client meeting, we won't take the intern and say, look, miss, I want you to do this presentation. Doesn't matter, you screw it up. And you know what? I will prep you for this presentation. We don't do that. I will stay back today. You make me a presentation, and I'll put you up in front of the client. Only when we do those things that then we fractalize as a leadership team and we scale up the organization. So it's no longer one Gaurav and one Jaideep. It is really an organization that can be 600 today, 6,000 tomorrow. In becoming the CEO of a company and in becoming the entrepreneur, there's one problem. All of us have undue pressure on our own shoulders. We think that we must be seen as the most hardworking guy here, not most the hard-thinking guy here. So hardworking guy means that Gaurav and Jaideep have to open the office. And even if they don't have any work, they must be leaving office at 9 o'clock at night. Because how can an entrepreneur, how can the senior-most guy in the organization be seen goofing off? Now, similarly, if you look at the burden of entrepreneurship and what I will argue the burden of leadership, we think we must have answers to all questions. So people walk in and they say, boss, this customer, this client is saying this, what do I say? This banker is saying this, what do I do? And we feel very compulsed that I must have the answer. We forget that your and my job is not to have the answer. Your and my job is to question. Because we need to be able to always come out with the right answer, we don't empower our people to exercise the brain and to say, so what would you do if you were to handle this and I'm not around? So we don't need to be seen as the most hardworking people. We don't need to be seen as people who have all the answers, but we have to be seen as people who attract those people, who work hard, work smart, have the answers. Let me tell you, Azim Premji can't write a single line of software code. I've worked for him, but he knows how to employ the best people in the world. That's how that company has scaled. So I told you about all the principles. Now let me tell you about the last but not least principle, and that's about scaling adversity. When I look at the best companies in the country, whether it's Tata's or the TVS group, they're not necessarily the smartest people. Let's talk about Tata's are very well known. So let me talk to you about the TVS group because most of you are from the western part of the country, may not be familiar. The TVS group today is a more than $14 billion conglomerate, more than 100 years old. Now, if you look at the TVS group today, which has crossed over 100 years, what has it taken to do so? It's not just your competence. It's not your engineering capability. It's not your innovation. It's your sheer ability to survive when everything is falling apart. Now, let me exemplify that. Imagine that it's 1940, and you are the patriarch of the TVS group, because that time the TVS women would not run the company. 1940. So 1942, Quit India movement is just 2 years away. You have no idea about the future of the country. Forget about the future of your business. Today we worry about what the RBI governor is going to do with the interest rate. Today we worry about what will happen in the 2014 election. Today we worry about, whether a particular law will be introduced or withdrawn. But imagine 1940, and you're the TVS patriarch, you don't even know. The critical thing is to be able to hang in there when you don't know the answer and sometimes you don't know the question. Ladies and gentlemen, let me stop here for a moment and turn it over to you for anything that might engage you. It doesn't have to be about scaling. It could be anything which is professional. It could even be personal, but I retain the right to either answer or not to answer this question. Thank you very much. Thank you. And as you engage me, it would be nice if you can tell a little about yourself, because I'm sure many of the other invitees may not know you. And certainly if I get to know a little bit about yourself, then I know the context. So both of you can. Yeah, please. So please be seated. You're with friends.
So Subroto, thank you so much. It was very inspiring and a very nice talk. My name is Rishi Agrawal. I used to, until recently, manage the Bank of New York Mellon's technology center called Inotex Technologies, based out of Magarpata City, Pune. And for the last 7 months, I've become an entrepreneur and I've started a company in the area of software-defined data center space.
Wonderful.
So the question I have, and again, I used to manage a very large organization at BNY Mellon, nowhere close to the size that you are doing for the last several years, but nevertheless, 4,000 or 5,000 people is a pretty large number in this country. So the question I have is around the concept of product development and innovation, right? So I know your discussion has been fairly generic, but regardless of which industry you talk about, it's never easy to find the people or the leadership, or even be able to create an ecosystem which develops leadership to a point where we can facilitate the process of innovation and product development. If you compare ourselves to Silicon Valley, there's no comparison. So what are your thoughts on what could this country be doing differently at a leadership level, both political and non-political, in order to create that ecosystem where the best and the brightest are actually engaged in this part of the world and creating the intellectual property rights and patents for this country, and creating that value for investors here rather than migrating over the rest of the world? What could be done differently?
It's a huge, huge, subject, and we could be all night on this. And I don't want to trivialize it. All I'll tell you is that I've been speaking to tier 2 entrepreneurs, sometimes, absolute startups in different parts. And I find that there's a fundamental problem with us Indians. We are in love with technology. And technology doesn't create products. We have to be in love with life. Let me exemplify that. Let me first talk about, I don't know how many of you tweet here. I don't tweet, by the way. But if you, I'm sure even if you don't tweet, you know about Twitter. Now, what is Twitter? What does the name symbolize? Why is the name Twitter? Any one of you? What is Twitter? Why the name Twitter? What does it come from? The bird, yeah. What does a bird do? Tweet. Okay. So why does a bird tweet? Are you sure?
Nobody else can understand.
Okay.
Small bites.
But yeah, sure, but why does small bites, nobody else can understand, happy, not happy, but why do you think birds tweet?
Socializing with other birds.
Good, socializing with other birds, okay? Expressing for what? What?
They can't speak,
But they're speaking, when a bird tweets, that's bird speak.
Showing its presence.
Lovely. It's location. And location and looking for a mate. When I tweet, as against give an alarm call, which is very different, A bird is a notifying presence, and a bird is seeking a mate. Now, when Twitter came out, it was meeting that ancient need, that timeless need in you and me to do the same thing, because it is animalistic. We are animals at the end of the day. And we're looking for other people to know where my location is. Sometimes for a mate, and it doesn't have to be a physical mate, sometimes it's an intellectual mate. So when the Twitter concept came about, the people who made that product were not in love with the technology below. They were saying, man, it's a global world. People have to run into metros. You know, they have a difficult time. They get out of metros. They go into their schools, colleges, and they go into their offices. They come back tired. And they need to say, I'm doing this, what are you doing? I'm available, I'm not available. So it is the lonesomeness of the urban, I'll argue to begin with male and then female, the metro male, metro female, the well-educated, okay? And then it just became viral and doesn't matter. Any of those characteristics don't matter anymore. But Twitter is Twitter because the people behind Twitter understood this. So if we were to build products, we have to take technology as granted, and technology is utility. So I ask people, just imagine India for the next 15 years. Just imagine India for you and me in this room for the next 15 years. I'll argue that 70% of the people in this room will require a knee surgery. Post-knee surgery, you will require a rehab. You require a physiotherapist. Is there an opportunity there? It doesn't have to be me. What about my in-laws in Sholapur and my mother in Nagpur? She is 70, but she is doing well. She's agile and active. I cannot be with her. What about loneliness? So if we look at life and living issues, and the great thing about India today is that there's no dearth of that. From recyclable plastic to geriatric loneliness, it's just enormous. The opportunities are enormous. So we need to look at a life and living issue and then say, look behind and say, what technology? Cloud, SaaS, mobility, who cares? So we need to fix that and shift the techie mindset to a life mindset. Now, how do you do that? You can do that by one of two things. Either you are deeply in love with something, or you're deeply angry about something. Not the AAP type, but productively angry. When you love something and intersects with your competence, I understand how musical instruments work, and I love music. So is there an opportunity today, and technology becomes a means to an end? So if your love and your competence intersect, then very high degree of chance that something will come out of it. Not because it's guaranteed success, but what happens is when your love and competence intersect, you are willing to stay longer with the problem. Problem doesn't hurt. If it's low love and high competence, smallest problem will hurt you. You want to give up. But when love and competence come together, the biggest problem will not hurt you. The second thing is you have to be angry about something. Why does something have to be the way that it is? And then you come out with a solution. So we need to look at our own lives in a deep and personal way. It's got nothing to do with politics. It's nothing to do with the corrupt government of India or inefficient UPA or their friends. Because if you found your love, or your source of anger, then all of you have a passport, go to Singapore and incorporate the company there. If you look at an example like MakeMyTrip.com, they didn't even raise money in India. They sell tickets in India to people like you and me. But they went and sold their company to investors in NASDAQ. So to build a company out of India today, I don't have to be an Indian company. So it's in the intellect. The key thing is, am I in love with something? Is it something that deeply, deeply bothers me? Is there a product opportunity there? Indians have been traditionally, you and me included, have been adaptive people. What it means is that we very conveniently gravitate towards what we understand best, which is engineering. The world doesn't need any engineering. The Mars engineer, imagine how much of engineering has gone behind the rover. But somebody, for heaven's sake, wanted to go to Mars. That's more critical than the engineering. The engineering piece will take care of itself. The financing will take care of itself. So I think that's very important that from an adaptive mindset, we go into the next level and the next level. And there are two other levels of mindset. One is what we call the experiential mindset. What's the experiential mindset? Let me exemplify that by telling you about Nissan. What Nissan did when they wanted to come out with a car for the European market, they did not compare 5 brochures of different cars, like many of us have done in India, and built a car, which is an aggregate of all those 5. They actually flew 200 engineers to Frankfurt Airport, got down, rented 200 different makes of cars, not 200 different makes of cars, but varieties of cars, and they drove 2,500 kilometers all over Europe. The issue was not designing a car. The issue was, what does it take to be a motorist in Europe? Because the driving experience on the Autobahn, many of you will know, is very different from driving on the French Alps. Driving the French Alps in winter is very different from driving the French Alps in